Facebook. I don't know why Facebook's always the darkest one. All right. Good morning, everybody. For those of you in the United States, good night. Let's get our discussion going. Sharon, can you bring me a napkin? All right. All right. So, today we're getting into a bit of an abstract concept for folks who are not already actively, thank you, already actively working on generational wealth, estate planning, and family planning to a certain extent. However, it's one of the most important pieces of the puzzle that virtually no one ever talks about. Not really sure why that is. And maybe it's because it's so abstract. I don't particularly think it's a secret. There really aren't very many of those. Typically, it's just that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know where to go find the information. And that's essentially how things play out. All right. So the feature that we're talking about is the family constitution. And a lot of people don't understand why it's needed, why it works, so on and so forth. So you run into this situation of if you want something you never had, you have to do something you never done, right? And inside that concept are tons of things that you don't even know exist because you've never done them, right? And you've never had the outcomes associated with them. The family constitution is one of those things. The issue that families run into when they start trying to create a generational wealth structure or a family structure in general is that there are deficiencies in the way that they operate the family. And those deficiencies hold back their goals as far as, creating a generational wealth structure and creating a legacy family that exists beyond themselves, right? So what ends up happening is within the structure, it takes care of certain rules that should be in place to make sure that the family progresses in the way that you want the family to progress. Money management rules, it's a big one. There should be a plan for conflict, right? You're never going to have a family where there's no conflict within that family. So there should be a plan for dealing with conflict, the conflict resolution plan, right? There should be standards for education. There should be standards for conduct, how members of the family should conduct themselves, and there should be standards for succession. It shouldn't be some giant question mark as to what's going to happen in the future with the family. There should be continuity when a leader passes on, because death and taxes guaranteed, right? It's the only two things that are guaranteed in life. So when that happens and a leader passes on, there should be continuity within the family. That comes from being able to expect certain things and to predict what is going to happen. You also don't want the children in the family having to guess what the parents in the family want. Okay, that's going to send you down a spiraling path that's never that doesn't seem to be a good outcome, right? You can never say never. There's always outliers that prove the rule, but in our experience over the last decade and a half, it's not the outcome you want. You want the kids to know exactly what it is the parents are looking for so they can be that. And typically that's what kids do, right? If you're a parent, if you got some kids, if you've done this before, then you know that typically if you have a standard, your kids want to meet that standard, right? So standard has to be realistic enough so that you're not eroding their self-esteem by setting standards that they can't meet and teaching them that they keep failing and that they can never meet that standard, right? So that's kind of your base level build for your family constitution. You want to make sure that those things are all covered inside of that. You want to make sure that there are clear values. So you want to, if you're doing it on your own, right? So we have quite a few clients that they're creating their branch of their family, and there's no input from anyone else because there's no one else to have input. Sometimes it's a no contact situation. Sometimes it's an orphan situation. We get a lot of that. Because I guess those folks are motivated to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So, we do get a lot of that. But whatever the situation is, if it's one person, then it's easier and harder. It's easier in the sense that you get the final say. It's harder in the sense that you're not getting input from other family members as to what might be best for your group, right? So you want to make sure, that you figure out what's going to make the most sense for you in that regard. But once you do that, you want to make sure that the values are clear, right? Whatever those values may be, those values don't have to be accepted by anybody else. The world doesn't have to agree with the values, none of that nonsense. It just has to be that the values are clear and everybody knows what the family stands for. Guessing is the enemy of progress. You want everybody to be on the same page and no one to be guessing, right? That guessing is going to be the enemy of progress, right? So if you want to make sure that you're progressing and that everything is going well, that there is no guessing within the family, that everybody knows what's going on. No one's guessing. What do we stand for? What are we doing? You don't want people to be having existential crises. Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's next for me? All of that stuff should be answered within the family constitution so that they skip the existential stage and go right into the work that they want to do for the family. Now, you don't want to be ridiculously specific either, right? Because then you box the family members in. So you don't want to be so specific that everybody has to be a carbon copy of you, or that everybody has to be doing, one profession or anything like that. You can create endowments for those things if you're serious about those things. Like, look, I really want a family full of, I don't know, neurosurgeons, right? You feel very strongly about neurosurgery. You yourself are a neurosurgeon. Or even in some cases, we've had situations where it's like the white whale. Like it's the thing that the person wished they could have been and they never were. And they want to inspire family members to go ahead and be that thing, right? You can create endowments, right, that incentivize people to go that route. But if you create your entire family structure around everybody picking the exact same, either hobbies or career or business or degree, that's going to fall apart quick. There has to be enough wiggle room for people to be able to be themselves, go after their own dreams, have individual dreams, right? And then still be aligned with the visions and the goals of the family. Okay. A really, really, really good example of that is the Kennedy family. They do it really, really, really well. They're not necessarily the richest family, but they maintain their value systems and their goals, and they maintain keeping, all family members moving in the right direction. And they do that really, really well via their family constitution. Okay, so that's Family Constitution 101. Any questions on that before I move on? Any questions on that? Let's see. All right, excellent. So you want to make sure that you have clear rules for money, right? So there should be clear rules for money. There should be clear rules for business. There should be clear rules for property, and there should be clear rules for inheritance. All right. You want a blueprint for how the family operates. Super important, right? The more that every aspect of your family is predictable for the members within, the easier that family is going to move forward, right? It's the same concept actually with criminal justice, right? Laws only work if there's a certainty of punishment, a predictability of if I break this law, what's going to happen to me. If it's up in the air and no one really knows what's going to happen, maybe I'll get in trouble, maybe I won't get in trouble, more criminal activity happens. If people have a guaranteed result, if I do X, Y will be the consequence, and they're not going to let me go, they will catch me, then there's less criminal activity, right? So you want a similar thing happening in your family where there's a guarantee of like, okay, if I do A, B, and C, I will receive X, Y, and Z. Okay. You want a system that reduces fights. You don't want to pit descendants against each other, thinking that it's going to result in the strongest, descendants have won situation. That's a movie. That's not real life, right? So you don't want to pit your descendants against each other. You don't want to pit heirs against each other. You want a system that reduces fights, right? But teaches conflict resolution. You want a culture your children will pass on to their children. So there has to be an element of ownership in the culture. There has to be an element of almost coolness in the culture. Think about things like, Boy Scouts, right? Or fraternities, college fraternities, or even adult fraternities like Knights of Columbus and Freemasons and the Elks and all of those guys, right? There's an element to their culture that they're excited about, that they appreciate, and that they want to pass on, right? Fraternities and sororities want new members. They want new frat brothers. They want new sorority sisters, right? Those non-collegiate sororities and fraternities, they want the same thing. Masons want new Masons. Elks want more Elks. Eastern Stars want more Eastern Stars, right? So there's within that society, which all families have a social structure, they're all societies, and within that society there's an aspect of the society that they want to pass on, but that they also guard jealously as their property, right? So they want more members that also own that property, and then they're very excited to pass those things on to those new members. So you need both sides of that balance, where heirs are excited to pass things on to their heirs, but at the same time, it is the property, the intellectual property of their family, and so they guard it jealously within the family, essentially. All right, I'm going to kind of move in phases. So, does everybody kind of get that? You understanding what's happening here with the construction of that family through that family constitution so far? We got it? All right, good. Now, how this thing is going to protect money, right? It sets rules for spending and for investment, right? Investment is the most important part. You can actually cover what a lot of people might consider to be irresponsible spending with extraordinarily responsible investment, right? So if your investment is on point, even if the spending is out of control, as long as the compounding is under control, it'll cover the spending. So the spending is definitely the weaker part of that, of that formula. If the investing is on point and the investing happens automatically and it happens habitually and it's just something that is done, period, then the family at large is going to grow at a rate faster than the burn through rate. And the burn through rate is like how much money is being spent. Now, it goes back to that foundation of the family where there are money management rules at the foundational point. So typically what happens is families that have a family constitution, even when their spending is out of control, to outsiders, it seems as though their spending is not out of control at all because they were raised with money management. So when they veer away from their level of money management, their out of control spending looks like the most disciplined spending in the world to a family that doesn't have a money management system and wasn't raised with a money management system via their family constitution, right? Now, the Constitution creates a clear connection to those who came before as well. That's actually significant, right? Understanding what members of the family did before you, why they did it, all right, and then what they gained from it is super important because it leads back into predictability. All right. We're always most comfortable when we can predict the outcome. Always, always, always. Right. So it leads back into that predictability, and we're able to say, okay, grandpa did X, Y, and Z. He got A, B, and C. If I do X, Y, and Z, I should be able to assume that I'll get something close to A, B, and C. Right. So that's the mindset that you're cultivating by knowing your history. Right. Some people look at the negative side of history and like, oh, you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Okay, that's true too. But if you know your history and you know your successes, then you're destined to be successful in the same way as well, right? So it's both sides. It's not just the negative. There's the positive and the negative. So knowing the history gives you a pathway to repeating the successes of the path, and it allows you to not be doomed to repeat the failures of the past, right? So it's important to have that record and that legacy, going back. It also allows you to maintain your own family's lineage, right? So you'll know who all the members of your family are, and it actually gets overwhelming very quickly, like ridiculously quickly. And so at some point in time, there will be a family historian, and it will be the family historian's job to manage the entire family tree. Right. So there was a guy masquerading as a Kennedy. I think they actually made like a Netflix documentary about him or something. So you can go watch the documentary about the guy. But the guy was masquerading as a Kennedy. He was like, I feel like he was at George Bush's inauguration and Barack Obama's inauguration, like, trading on the I'm a Kennedy type of situation. And it turned out that like the other Kennedys couldn't even confirm whether he was a Kennedy or not. It had to go to the Kennedy family historian, right? So you will get to the point where your family is so big that you actually have a legit historian who can say like, yes, this person's part of the family, or no, this person is not, right? So branches will open up, right? So like for our family, I'm part of the JM lineage, right? All lineages are currently still related to each other, right? So our family funneled. There was like a thing that happened where all the other branches were essentially wiped out. Our family funneled down into like one line left. There were some like cousins. Their name is spelled a little bit differently. And then now the family is spreading back out again, right? So now like marriages are happening where, someone may have the same name as me, but not actually be related other than through marriage, right? Okay, fine. So that makes things a little bit easier for our family because our family was kind of culled down to one line and now is expanding back out into multiple lines. But for some folks, you already have 30 lines of your family. So the issue then becomes, from a legal perspective, if you're setting up your family trust, you want to make sure that the members of your family that you don't even know exists are not making a claim against the trust, right? So that's a big part of the Constitution as well, is that the Constitution will spell out exactly which line of the family does it apply to, right? So for example, for us, our lineage is the JM lineage, right? There are other lineages, but we're part of the JM lineage, and our family constitution only applies to the JM lineage, and only members of the JM lineage can tap into the wealth that's in our family trust, right? And so that family tree is there. Now, the other lineages are acknowledged as far as, who's the progenitor, who's the progenitor's sister, who's the progenitor's brother, who's the progenitor's mother. So you'll be able to find other branches through that. But they are not covered, especially under the family trust. The trust and the Constitution are different things, but the Constitution definitely informs the trust. All right. All right. All right. So, how does the Constitution help with the generational wealth? It literally cuts out all the bullshit. That's how it helps. It cuts all the bullshit out, and creates a situation where no one is questioning what they're supposed to do. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do, right? Have you ever heard like, oh, well, there's no manual for life, or there's no instruction manual for raising kids, or there's no instruction manual for this, no instruction manual for that. There can be. And that's a very like real kind of excuse, right? Like just because something is an excuse doesn't mean it's not valid, right? So that's a very real kind of excuse. Like, well, I just don't know how to do it. No one's taught me how to do it. I don't know where to go find the information. I just don't know how to do it, right? The family constitution removes that excuse from the family planning. You do know how to do it because you've been taught how to do it from birth, and there's literally a book, there's literally an instruction manual that tells you how to do it. All right. So now just take a step back and think about that for a minute. If you're born with an instruction manual for life, with real world examples, right, and actual, you know, evidence, real world evidence for what's going to happen when you utilize this instruction manual, how far ahead are you of everybody else? Like, how much further are you in life right from the jump if you have an instruction manual on how life works, how money works, how success works? If you're born with an instruction manual on life, how much farther ahead are you than your peers and then everybody else around you, right? So that's what the family constitution does. It allows you to have an instruction manual on how life works from birth to the point where you just think it's normal, right? You think the outcomes that you get are just standard outcomes, you know, because they come from discipline, they come from what was instilled from the family constitution. So that's how it works. You have to have enough vision to set that up for the next generation if it wasn't set up for you, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, for me, I always knew, and I'm not even really sure why, but I always knew that my children were supposed to get more out of life than I got out of life. That's been something that I've kind of always had a focus on. And I just had my first child 19 months ago, right? It wasn't a forced situation either, where, you know, I've kind of irresponsibly had kids and now I got to figure it out, like, right? So it was always essentially a planned situation. And so I always knew that I was going to put things in place for the next generation. I remember coming across a woman named Wendy, and she was from Trinidad. And I remember in conversation, I asked Wendy, don't you want better for your kids than you had? And Wendy said no. That was the first time that I realized that there are people out there who just don't give a damn. They don't give a damn about their kids. They don't give a damn about their future. They don't give a damn about their, you know, their family and cultivating that. And it flabbergasted me. I had no idea. I didn't know what to even say to that, right? And if I'm not mistaken, Wendy was pregnant at the time. So like we were having this discussion, she was pregnant, so she was bringing a kid into the world, and I distinctly remember being like, well, don't you want, you know, your kids to have better than you have? And she was like, no, I don't want my kids to have anything better than me. So it's like, whoa, right? So there are some people that their mentality just does not align with generational wealth. Their mentality does not align with family, and the outcomes in their life are going to be, cohesive with that mentality of theirs, and that's just what their life is going to be like. But I think the ability to kind of take back and step back and take a look at what's going on really changes your powers of analysis. Right. I remember I grew up like in the hood. I was born in project housing. We made it out of the projects into the worst part of the city I was born in. So the sixth ward was the worst ward at that time. I don't think it is anymore. But so we went literal project housing, got out of project housing, got a house in the sixth ward, right in the middle of it. Right. I remember like the first year I was living there, I was only like 5 years old. Somebody jumped the fence in the backyard. Another guy jumped the fence after him. I'm literally sitting in the backyard in the dirt playing marbles, So I got the circle with the hole in the middle and the marbles, right? Two guys jumped the fence. One guy pulls out, the thing, does the other guy right in the head, right in front of me. Body drops right in front of me, jumps over the fence, takes off. Police are there 30 minutes later, removing the body, right? So that's where I grew up. And so it was interesting because I remember, like, as a middle schooler, right? So now I don't know what we talk about, like a 12-year-old. I remember people complaining about like how good they were and how these bad things kept happening to them, even though they were so good. And I remember being able to even step back at that time and be like, okay, you're a great person, according to you, but all your friends are thieves. And you keep complaining about how you're so good and you help everybody and you help all your friends, but everything keeps getting stolen from you. But all your friends are thieves. You hang out with nothing but thieves, whether you're a thief or not, right? So things keep getting stolen from you. And it was, to me, it was just like, but I noticed that within that environment, people didn't have the skill to step back and analyze what was going on. Everything was happening to them. They had no control over their environment at all. And that control came from, even though my family did not have an official family constitution, it came from proof provided by my family as to what was possible, right? So real world proof, and then those values being instilled, right? So I had a family that like immigrated from the Caribbean, they proved that they could immigrate in. They were in the projects, government housing. I was born in a project called Oak Brook Projects. So born in the Oak Brook Projects, like from the Oak Brook Projects to home ownership in the city. Like, so all of the proof was there, right? Like you have control over the circumstances from the worst circumstance, to the best circumstance. And maybe that wasn't a standard situation. And so there was a lot of just folks that thought that life happened to them. And that's how they lived their life. And that's how their outcomes happened. And from their viewpoint, there was nothing that they did to contribute to that, which is wild to me. That's like a scary idea, So what the family constitution does, excuse me, what family constitution does is let all your heirs moving forward know that that's not true. And not only is that not true, it's not just not true philosophically. Here's the proof. Here's what we've done. Here's how we've done it. Here's where we came from, right? So like in my family lineage, knowing where I was born is something that's passed down, right? There are certain holidays that are family holidays. And in some of those holidays, we tell stories about the family that have come before us, right? So everyone in my lineage knows I was born in the Oak Brook Projects. Everyone in my lineage knows that by 4 years old, we gotten out of the projects into the worst part of the hood, right? Not even sure it was really an upgrade. Because if you did something wrong in the projects, you got kicked out. And that might mean that you were homeless, right? So people didn't act up as bad actually in the projects as they did, in the hood. So, but that progression from the bottom, to the top is something that all of the heirs of this particular lineage of my family know about. It's their histories that they all understand, and that they can all draw on as what is possible, and how do you control your own destiny, and how do you get from the bottom to the top, and what were the steps that were taken, and what was done, and was it a straight line? No, right? That's another important part of the family education. It's not a straight line, right? So we're in the projects, then we made it out of the projects, and now we're in the hood, and we made it out, of the hood. Now, the patriarch was homeless. You know what I mean? So now he's homeless and he's living on the streets, and and now he's back, and he's gotten off the street. So this understanding that it's not a straight line, and that when you hit turbulence, it doesn't mean you failed, goes a long way in predictability within the family. If they can predict that there's going to be good times and there's going to be bad times, and you have to weather the storm, and there's social proof that if you weather the storm, you'll come out the other side, right? It makes that decision-making process a hell of a lot easier and way stronger, right? Also, obviously, as you're working on, your generational wealth plan, you can make it so that they don't have to experience some of those things, right? So I can't currently, based on the status of all my generational wealth vehicles, I can't see a situation by which the next 2 or 3 generations of my heirs would ever have to be, homeless. So you can go ahead and take care of things like that. But the reality of that, can still be impressed upon your heirs within the history of the family, right? So your family constitution should have that kind of base. It should grow with the family. It should expand. There should be what they call in sociology artifacts, family artifacts. So family artifacts are going to include symbols. They're going to include celebrations. They're going to include holidays. They're going to include, rituals. Like one of our rituals was pizza on Friday night, right? Every Friday night, we would go to, no, I'm lying, Saturday night. Every Saturday night, we would go to Blockbuster. We'd go to Blockbuster. We'd be able to pick 2 movies, and then we'd have pizza delivered. We put like a blanket out on the living room floor, and we would eat pizza, drink orange soda or whatever, and watch like a Disney movie, and then some other movie, and then the kids would go to bed, and then the parents, almost kind of got like a date thing. There was like an adult movie that kids, couldn't watch. And the kids would go to bed, and then the parents would get one more movie, and then they would go to bed. And so that was a ritual. Every Saturday night, we could count on that family time happening, right? And so those kinds of things create predictability and create stability in the framework of the family, right? And for some folks that maybe didn't have a family or didn't have any predictability in their family, they don't necessarily know why those things are important. So it's a matter of building out what you want your family to be moving, forward, versus maybe what your family was in the past. And sometimes those are the strongest kind of proponents within, the family constitution space, are the people who had the shittiest families, right? And they want to make sure that does not happen again. Or people who their families could have, really left them a decent inheritance, and because they didn't, and because they didn't have the right planning, all of that kind of got eaten up in probate, because you got to pay for probate. And probate's forced upon you if you don't have a trust, and even though it's forced upon you by the government, you got to pay for it. So you end up losing some of your inheritance to probate, if your family didn't set up a proper succession plan, right? So sometimes people go through that and they're like, jeez, all they had to do was a little bit of planning and we would have been all right. And instead, maybe we're in a serious condition, right? We've definitely seen people where like their parents were put in elder care and they were living in the family home, and then because like Medicaid, Medicare comes in and pays that elder care, they're allowed to come back and sell your property to reimburse themselves for what they paid for that old folks home for your parents. So now it's not just your parents lost the house, that might have been the family house, and maybe the kids were living there. So now your parent passed, they didn't have a proper succession plan, they didn't use a trust to protect that family home, and now the government's taking that home and selling it to pay for the family care, and now everybody's homeless, right? So their lack of planning actually set the family back a generation. Now you got to figure out how to get a place to live and stop being homeless in one of the worst housing markets, in the last 20 years, right? So the smallest amount of planning and thinking ahead can save your family from extraordinary heartbreak. So people who have gone through that are typically the ones who really get it and are all about getting, their family constitution done, their generational wealth plan done. And while the family constitution helps the entire family, generational wealth planning only helps the next generation. Generational wealth planning does not do anything for the person who originates the plan. I don't benefit in any way, shape, or form from my generational wealth plan. My son will, right? And his children will. But I don't benefit from it at all, right? And there's a solid possibility that by the time I might be, in need of like elder care or anything like that, where, my son, might want to step up and help help me with that or whatever. By that time, I might just be gone, right? So even in that regard of like later in life, it may benefit me. That's so few and far between that it's not even worth mentioning. So, your generational wealth planning does not assist you or help you in any way, shape, or form. That's just the mindset to go into it with. And if you're too selfish to want your children to have the best, or if you're one of those people like Wendy who didn't want her children to have better than her, if you're one of them, then it's not for you. Just keep YOLOing it up. You'll get out of life exactly what you put into it, and you'll have everything that you deserve, and that'll be the end of that. But if you are trying to make sure that your family has a better way of it than you, and that each generation has a better life, then you have to plan. It's not something that you can manifest. It's not something that just happens on its own. It's not, you can't cast a spell. You got to do the work. You got to do the work, right? And you have to teach them how to do the work, and they have to understand the rules, and they have to understand why, right? They have to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they have to understand that it works, right? You can't run a family on blind faith, right? You have to understand that it works. There has to be social proof. They have to understand why they're doing it. They have to be incentivized to do it, right? All of the same things that you would do with like a business, right? You wouldn't expect employees to come in and just work well with no pay. They don't even know what they're selling at the job. They don't know what their job is, and you expect them to do well? Of course not. Everybody understands that, right? Everybody understands that if you get a job, you have to be paid. You have to know what it is you're doing at work. You have to be trained so that you can do it well, right? You'd have to have a financial incentive that you might get a raise, you might get a promotion so that you keep on doing it. You still have to enjoy it to a certain extent, or even the money's not enough, you'll still quit and go somewhere else. We all understand that. But when it comes to building our family, we forget. Like, we act like we don't know anymore. We don't understand how this works anymore. It's literally the same thing, right? You just got to be willing to do the work. right? And in this case, you're more like the CEO. You might never make any money, right? The entrepreneur gets paid last, always, right? So when you're doing your generational wealth planning, you are not benefiting from that. The next generation is, but your family constitution planning, you are benefiting from that directly because you are cultivating the family that you want to live with, right? So the morals of the family, the norms of the family, the way the family progresses, like our family does charity at least once a year. There's a holiday. It's actually coming up. It's December 4th. There's a family memorial day, and that during that family memorial day, there are certain memorial members of the family that we talk about and what they did and how they did it and blah 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 blah. And then we have to commit to a philanthropic or a charitable project that has to be completed by Memorial Day the following year, right? So at least one charitable activity has to happen every year, right? At least one. So these are norms that you're instilling in each generation of the family, right? And that was important to us. I have clients that like maybe philanthropy is not important to them, but art is, right? And they have situations where once a year there's an art project that has to happen. It could be sculpture, it could be painting, it could be music, it could be, right? Because remember we said you can't box people in too tight, right? Because different people are going to be whatever. But that arts family, now everyone is an artist, and in ways that like I wasn't even thinking about. They have architects in that family now that align obviously with the art side of thing. They have interior designers. They have martial artists, right? Which I wasn't thinking about that when they said that they were all into the arts. So they have like martial artists, all at the most elite levels, right? They have I don't know what it's called because I'm not a big art person, but the people who make art out of dots, like they do all the little colored dots. They got one of the descendants, one of the heirs does that and is quite successful at it. They have musicians, of course, pantomimes, actors, all kinds of crazy art folks. There's even a school. Trying to remember the name of the school. It's in Shillington, Pennsylvania, on Penn Avenue. What is the name of the school? But it's the whatever School of Arts, right? So their family trust even created an art school eventually. And so it was a broad enough, base where people can be what they want to be, but still pull from the art base of the family. There's even a plastic surgeon, right? So there's even a doctor that went into surgery and then went into the art form of surgery, and applied their art that way. So, it just has to be broad enough that people can be who they want to be within what the family is. It can't be super specific where everybody has to be a plumber, you know what I mean? And there's, that's not going to work. Your family's going to fall apart. There's just going to be people born that they're not meant to be plumbers, you know what I mean? So you want to make sure that it's a framework, not a prison cell. Okay? Like for my family, it's science. Okay? For my family, we have a focus on science and a focus on medical science. Right? But that allows people to do or be whatever they want. You know what I mean? They don't have to be scientists. They don't have to be doctors. They don't have to be any of that. We do a lot of philanthropy in those spaces, but that's just what our family happens to be about. But it's open enough that anybody can be anything within that framework, right? I have a cousin who is a general contractor, but he's an engineer. He's a structural engineer, right? So within the framework of those things of science and medicine, you can essentially be whatever you want to be. It just has to be broad like that, or else it's going to fall apart. There are some like top tier families that were really, really significantly wealthy, but their focus was too narrow, and within a couple generations, that was the end of it for them. Vanderbilts are one of those. Go back and look at the Vanderbilt family constitution. Now the last Vanderbilt heir doesn't even carry the name Vanderbilt, and has no wealth from the Vanderbilt fortune at all. So essentially, their family died. But the one thing to maintain about that, or to look at about that, is go ahead and Google who the person is. They're famous. You know them, especially if you're an American. And so the morals instilled from the family constitution still gave them the ammunition they needed to make it. They had no money left, so they weren't able to lean on the family trust to make it, but they still had the education and the mindset to make it, and they did. So they're a millionaire in their own right now, but they're just not part of the family trust anymore. Well, the family trust is essentially dead. Anytime a trust goes broke, the trust is essentially dissolved. And a trust doesn't exist until you fund it. So just because you write a trust deed, the trust doesn't exist until you fund it. So until there's money in the trust, it doesn't really exist. And if there's ever no money in the trust, it dies. How do we get started with the family constitution? It depends on whether it's a family endeavor or an individual endeavor, right? For some people, it's an individual endeavor. Some people come from really toxic families, and that's kind of the motivation to getting their family situated and having a formalized family constitution, right? So then if that's the case, then you're not discussing anything with anyone else. You're sitting down with the legal experts and all of that, and you're crafting what you want your family to be, and then the experts are keeping you realistic, right? Because a lot of people are like, okay, well, if I get to build a family, then I'll build this perfect family. And no, you're not. The family's going to fight. The family are going to do bad things to each other. There needs to be a conflict resolution plan in place so that they can deal with the bad things that happen to each other, right? We had a family that came back to us in tears, right? Letting us know how important that conflict resolution was to the entire family, when like the worst thing you could possibly, think of, or I guess, up there in the list of worst things you could think of actually happened, where it was like one brother ended up like sleeping with the other brother's wife. Typically, in a family without a constitution, that family would have been torn apart. People would have chosen sides. This side isn't talking to that side isn't talking to this side. This one hates that one and never speak again. Family's dead, right? Typically, that's what would happen in a situation like that. Because there was a conflict resolution article in their family constitution, they essentially had like a family court. The wrong party was punished. There's punishment built into the family constitution and all that. The wrong party was punished. The whole thing was done very transparently and without bias, because you want to make sure that your conflict resolution policy handles that, because you're all family. So there's going to be grandma likes this one better than that one and all of that. So you have to create mechanisms that eliminate that bias. And the family was able to come to terms. They were able to come to terms with it. They were able to accept that this person was guilty and that this person, was the victim and that this person was the perpetrator. They were able to accept, like, okay, this person, they paid their debt to our familial society. You know what I mean? So their debt has been paid. They've been rehabilitated. All of those things that we tried to achieve in society at large were achieved through the family constitution. So they were able to move past that, and the family business was able to survive, and the family was able to grow and to thrive. And they came back and they were like, we would not have been able to get past that tragedy had we not had a formalized family constitution and a formalized way of dealing with problems where the outcome was predictable, where it wasn't, oh, well, I bet that since they're the favorite child, or I bet that since, granny loves so-and-so, that, they're just going to look the other way. And the normal things that rip families apart, right? So families are incredibly powerful if they can all get on the same page, right? So you want to make sure that your constitution is designed in such a way that keeps those families together. All right. Does that answer your question? Your family went through something like that? Do they talk to each other? Your dad hasn't spoken to his brother in 20 years. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just and the wealth that your family has missed out on because of that is absurd. Like if he does the calculations, he'll cry. So yeah, it's a mess. Well, it has to be consistent. It has to be consistent. And oh, I'm sorry, I'm live on three different places. So how do you teach the children the family values? So it has to be consistent, and not always corrective, right? So you have to remember that, especially with the kids in the family, they're learning by watching. So you have to be consistent about following the values of family, right? And so we see this happening in like groups. We see this happening in like people who have joined like Eastern Stars, people who have joined a sorority, they're alphas, they're kappas, they're whatever. People who have, joined a non-collegiate fraternity or non-collegiate sorority, like the Masons or the Elks or, any of these other groups. People who have joined the Boy Scouts, people who have joined Civil Air Patrol, right? So when you join these organizations, there's typically some code of conduct, right? Or something that they believe in that sets you apart from everybody else, and you lean into those things, right? So people who are part of Civil Air Patrol, maybe they have military haircuts, and you know what I mean, and they either fly a lot or they go out and do search and rescue, a lot. Since there's two sides to that organization, and Masons have their meetings, once a month and whatever, and the Eastern Stars is the same thing, right? You see it a lot in religion as well, right? If you're part of a certain religion, like where I came up at, Pentecostals always went to church on Thursdays, right? Like they had like a Bible study on Thursdays. Right? Anybody who's going to church on Thursday, you knew they were Pentecostal, right? And so there are these things that people in groups do. So you have to create those things for your family. There has to be these things that your family does. There are symbols that people in groups recognize that no one else recognizes, right? So there has to be symbols that your family recognizes that no one else recognizes, right? So you have to create those things are called artifacts in sociology, right? So you have to create family artifacts that your family can rally around, that holds your family together, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well, yeah, yeah. Well, in that example, yeah, like a crucifix would be something that Catholics could rally together. They all recognize, like a rosary or whatever. They know what it means. When they see the rosary, that maybe they know. I know there's like a prayer that you can do with the rosary. I'm not a Catholic or whatever, but I know, Hail Marys and all of that. They know the words, right? Other people like me, I don't know the words because I'm not a Catholic, right? So those are the things. Those are artifacts. And so all Catholics can recognize those artifacts, and some of the artifacts outsiders can recognize and identify you as a Catholic. But again, like I can't say a Hail Mary. I don't know the words, right? So those artifacts bind those people together to the point where, in the history of the world, people go to war about stuff like that. Those artifacts are so powerful that the group that knows the Hail Mary, will have a crusade against the group that doesn't know the Hail Mary and actually take their lives, right? So artifacts are really, really powerful, right? And having something that your people rally around is really, really powerful. So in this context, the artifacts are familial and people understand what they mean, right? And the more legitimate they are, the more powerful they are. Now, where the source of that legitimacy comes from, right? Obviously, in religion, it comes from some divine being, right? So it's really hard to verify that, source of legitimacy. Within families, typically they actually come from verifiable sources, right? And so people will understand, and they can go back and track and verify, where the legitimacy of the family comes from, and it gives confidence. Legitimacy gives confidence, right? So like religious people are very confident that they will be in whatever their version of paradise is, or if it's heaven, if it's wherever the Elysian fields, like wherever it is, they believe they would go and be after they pass on. They're very confident in that, and that confidence allows them to move in a certain way within that circle, within those religious circles. They can move in a very confident way. They belong here. They're saved. They're whatever the term is. They're very confident because of that artifact, right? That social artifact that they have, that they've been taught that they belong to something special. It's the same for everything else, right? If you build a strong family with a strong family constitution, they might believe that they deserve to own a multi-million dollar company. They might believe that they deserve to, sit in the rooms and at the tables where decisions are happening that affect the entire world. And they might have the confidence to walk into those rooms and be accepted because they seem like they belong there, right? So that's what happens when you install those levels of artifact, with your family, and then everybody else inside of your family would be able to identify and decode in many instances those artifacts, right? For example, the men in my family have a gemstone in their wedding ring. The gemstone means something. It comes from a specific place. It's mined in a specific place. That means something to the legacy of our family, right? Now other people see it and they're like, "Oh, that's a birthstone? You were born in this month?" No, it's not. It's not my birthstone, right? Had nothing to do with me being born in any month, right? But that's an artifact of our family. People know the story of the gemstone. They know which type of gemstone this is. They know where it was mined, right? They know where it comes from. So that's one of the artifacts of the family. Okay, and the legitimacy of it is that people can go find the aquamarine mine and figure out what part of the world it comes from and why that story is important to us, right? This is a family crest. This is a daily wear family crest ring. There's a more prompt version of it that we might use for like a family meeting or something like that. But the family crest is on this ring, right? And so someone from my family would know what each element of this ring means, what part of history created each element. And it's not just some fake picture that somebody drew and then decided it's our family crest, or something that somebody looked up in a book based on a last name. The grant of arms was issued to the family. It's actually issued to an individual and passed along the family, but was issued by a heraldic authority. So that means that there are college of arms all over the world, but different heraldic authorities of different governments, and our particular coat of arms is granted by a heraldic authority. It's not something you can look up by last name in some book, which those are fake, by the way, right? No coats of arms were issued to surnames. There's no such thing. They were issued to an individual who might have had that surname, and it were passed along the male line. So understanding how those things work and understanding and being able to decode them. And now, so the authority for that artifact would be able to, you'd be able to go back to the College of Arms and see that there was a grant of arms, where those arms were granted to the family as a matter of legacy. So that again gives it authority, right? And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to create situations where you make things up and then they have no authority. That will have the opposite effect, right? I've actually seen that happen with the coat of arms situation, where somebody just, creates a pretty little picture and calls it their coat of arms. And then the next generation researches it and they're like, oh crap, this is fake. This isn't even a real coat of arms. And now you've damaged their confidence, right? Because now you set them up in a way that they can be exposed for something they didn't even do, right? So you don't want to fake things. You want to build artifacts for your family that are legitimate, that can be verified, and then that verification builds confidence. All right, does that answer your question there? Well, no, I think like the more complicated things will come with time, right? So like a coat of arms and all of that, that comes with time, and typically maturity. Like eventually those things will just kind of happen. But like I said initially, like one of our first artifacts was Saturday night pizza. Doesn't have to be something crazy complicated. Every Saturday night, so in my age, we went to Blockbuster and picked, VHS tapes. Got 3 of them. One was an adult movie for mom and dad. The first 2 were kid movies. And we started, watching TV at probably right around 5. So we watch a movie that'd be from 5 to 6. We'd watch one more from 6 to 7, and then we'd all be sent for baths and showers and go to bed, bedtime story, whatever, And then mom and dad would go back downstairs and watch a movie from 9 to 10, an adult movie or whatever. And that was it. That was an artifact. That was something that we could look forward to every week. That was something that we could expect would happen every week. And it was a ritual that we perpetuated into the future. And so it's something that that we do with our own kids, and so it becomes a family, ritual that moves on and moves forward from there. So it doesn't have to be, as codified as like, waiting for a heraldic authority to grant you arms or anything like that. It can be something as simple as movie night. Yeah, yeah. The most important thing is that your value system is codified. That's the most important first step. The second most important thing is that you have a monetary system that's codified, right? So you regulate how you utilize money, and you want that codified in your family constitution, right? You want an accounting system that's codified, right? So you want your heirs to learn that accounting system, right? So those things, and then you want a conflict resolution system that's codified, right? So those are like your 4 base priorities. And then from there, you get specific to your own family. I don't give enough fucks to do this. Absolutely. Don't do it then. Because you'll do it wrong. Yeah, if you don't care about your children enough, you don't care about your future enough, don't even do it. You'll just do it wrong. You'll end up damaging your family and damaging your children. So yeah, just keep that energy and go YOLO. You'll be all right. You'll be forgotten, but you'll be all right. Sure. I mean, it's not for everyone. You know what I mean? Not for everyone. For my kid, well, so there's no kids. There's just my son. We are thinking about having another one maybe in the next like 6 months. But for now, there's just kid. There's no kids. But what have the benefits been for my kid? So our legacy planning has made sure that he has the opportunity to do whatever he wants to do with life already at 19 months. He's fine. He'll be fine. Um, he has multiple passports in his portfolio right now, right? So he's 19 months old. He holds 4 passports, right? I only hold 3, so he already holds more passport power than I do because we planned it that way. His education is set, so he'll whether if we fall out of a plane tomorrow and we're gone and he's an orphan, his family trust will still take care of him. The lawyers that run that trust will be required to make sure that he has all the financial literacy that he needs, all the psychological knowledge that he needs, all the sociological knowledge that he needs. He'll have his entire family tree and his entire family history is codified. So he's good right now. If we disappeared, he's 100% fine because we had the wherewithal to think about him as well. Not even necessarily first, just as well. Because the thing is, it's ridiculously easy to put somebody in a good position over time. Time is the wild card. So over time, it's ridiculously easy to put somebody in a good position, right? It's called compounding. It's how the entire world works. Doesn't matter what kind of system you're using. Doesn't matter if it's capitalism. Doesn't matter if it's socialism. Doesn't matter if it's communism. That doesn't matter. Everywhere in the world, no matter what system you use, compounding is the rule of growth. And so if you have time, you don't need a whole lot of capital. If you don't have time, then you might need a whole lot of capital. So when you're planning for the next generation, it's stupid easy to take care of them. There's nothing hard about it at all. It's so easy that it's mind-boggling that everybody doesn't do it. And there was a time in the United States actually where everybody did, right? There were these things called Gerber plans. And like every time someone had a baby, all the grandparents, everybody would buy these like Gerber plans. And some of them would be like life insurance plans, some of them would be like investment plans. And they would just sit there because a newborn baby, they would just sit there till the baby was 21. And so they would drop $1,000, right? A tax return, something stupid. They would on these Gerber plans. And by the time, that baby hit 21, that $1,000 would be like 25,000, right? Now, if you kept compounding, until there was a grandbaby, let's say, so you compound for 60 years, it's over $1 million. Easy. It's over $1 million. It's the same thing that, all the financial people are talking about. You do your 401k from the time you start working till the time you're 65, you have $1.2 million. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. The only difference is you don't have to keep on contributing. You can make one payment, put it to the side, and make sure that it's invested and it keeps compounding and that all of the returns from the investment are automatically reinvested, and it'll compound over time. It'll pay itself. All of the returns from the investments will be the new payments. It'll pay itself for 60 years. And 60 years later, the dumb little $1,200 you put in there is 1.2 million, right? It's that easy. It just won't benefit you. It won't benefit you. And that selfishness is what keeps people from doing it. You will never touch that $1 million. It's for your kids or your grandkids. It won't benefit you. That's the only reason people don't do it, right? Half the people, if they weren't forced to do a 401k, wouldn't even have that. So that becomes the issue with the generational wealth planning. It's just that some people don't feel that their kids are worth it. Some people don't want to take care of the next generation, and all they care about is themselves. And unfortunately, it's the majority of people. So, it's super, super, super duper easy to get that done. It just doesn't benefit you. It won't help you in any way, shape, or form. And if you try to make it help you, the entire thing will fail. Because it has to compound uninterrupted for however many years it needs to compound. And you can calculate the years, right? Like we have had people, typically like grandparents and stuff, right? But we have had people that'll pop in and be like, look, I want this done in the next 20 years. That means that I need to make an initial investment of like $10,000 and let that compound for 20 years if I'm trying to get to $1 million that fast. So that the bigger the initial capital is, the faster you get to whatever your goal is, right? But you can do it with $100. Hey, what up, Eddie boy? Good to see you, man. So yeah, you can do it with $100. It's just going to take forever, right? So you can make the calculations and figure out how it's going to work, but it's just about people that wanting the best for the next generation, especially before that generation is even here. Those are the people who crush it. The people who are like, look, I ain't even got no kids, but I'm going to start this process off for the next generation. And when I do have kids, they're set. Those people, those are the ones who crush it. Because you have the most flexibility. You have the ability to go invest, even if it's investing in labor, which we call a job. So go get a job, invest in labor, whatever. You have the ability to do all the things that you want to do, take all the sacrifices you want to take, and make things really, really happen for yourself. And then, man, I tell you what, I am not even sure I would have been a good parent if I hadn't planned these things, right? Like now, I love parenting, and I'm sure all parents do, but I could definitely see the frustration it would have caused me had I done this 15 years ago. In the financial position I was in 15 years ago, in the life position I was in 15 years ago. Like if I had started parenting, I could see myself being short, unfairly with the children. I'm working, leave me alone. I could see all of that. All of the stuff that we see in like standard families, I can see all of that. I can see why it happens. I get it. I understand it. But because I planned this thing, and I planned for future generations, not just for myself, and I made sure I was set up, it's like a joy. My son will pop up and grab me in the middle of work and I'll leave. You know what I mean? I'll leave where I could be in a meeting where we're negotiating a business deal. And my 19-month-old will walk up and grab my hand and he ain't got a huge vocabulary. Come play. That's what's going to happen. Oh, you're leaving a $1 million deal on the table. I don't care. All of my needs are met. I'm good for life. I don't need to sell another thing. I don't need any of that, right? I planned everything out, my personal plan and my generational plan. I'm good. I'm 100% good. I'll get prospects that'll try that stuff as well. Like, oh, well, give me a discount or I'm walking walk. As a matter of fact, we're not doing business with you. What? You're throwing away the business? You don't want to make money? We don't need to make money. There's a difference. We're 100% set, right? We have a live-in governess. The governess is in charge of the nanny, the maids, all of that. Like, we're good. We just went to China. If you go check out our social media, we went to China and did some business. The baby came, the wife came, the governess came, the nanny came. Everybody flew to China. We did all the business. The baby's there. We went on a couple, boat rides and stuff like that. Everybody came. When I needed to focus on business, the governess did her job. The nanny was there, and all of that took place. It wasn't a problem. right? My wife runs her own business. She's not stuck at home, being a stay-at-home mother. If that's not her vibe right now, so she can do that. You know what I mean? We have a household set up that she can do that. She goes to work, she comes back, she take care of the baby. She plays with the baby and all of that stuff. I'm with the baby almost all day, every day. Because I work from my home office, right? So these are things we cultivated, but I don't know how these things would have played out had I not cultivated and planned and set these things up. I'm here to get set up. Need y'all's help. I got you. I got you. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, right? So it's up to what kind of person you are, I guess. But I always knew that hardship build character, yes, but hardship and danger don't have to be the same thing. Right. So are there hardships that are already, almost set up, for my son to go through and learn life lessons? Yes, he has to. He can't be some spoiled prince that, everything happens for him and he grows up having his butt wiped and all of that. No, he has to build character, but it doesn't have to be dangerous. Right. Those are two separate things. Right. I don't have to expose him to danger in order to build character. Right. So, but that was just my plan. Like I said, I mean, that conversation rings in my mind over and over and over again. And that was back in, I want to say it was back in like 2008. But that lady, Wendy, saying that she doesn't want better for her children than herself. I remember that conversation all the time. And it still blows my mind that a pregnant woman can be like, no, I want my kids to just suffer. Like, I want the best for me, not for them. It was nuts. But there's people out there like that. So you gotta decide what kind of person you are for this particular thing, to make sense to you. But if you're gonna build out a strong family constitution, make sure that you position your family to, be in a strong position in the future, and that your history is preserved. Then you have to have the desire to build something serious like that. If the desire's not in you, just don't do it. Don't do it. It's not going to work. If the desire's not in you, you're not going to do it. You do what you want to do. You might have all the excuses in the world about you don't have the money, you don't have the time, you don't have the this, you don't have the that. But when you want to do something, all of a sudden you got the time to do it. When you want to buy something, all of a sudden you got the time to buy it. It's just an excuse, right? And the excuses will work. You're correct. Either way, if you say you can do it, you're right. You say you can't do it, you're right. So if you don't have the passion for it, just don't do it. You're right. Keep it moving. Your life will be more enjoyable for you in the short term, at least. Yeah, Eddie, that was an impactful conversation, I tell you. I don't even think it would have hit the same way had she not been pregnant in the moment. But that was a wild conversation for a pregnant woman to have. All right. Any other questions on the family? Yeah, yeah. On the family legacy, and the family constitution as the foundational document of the family legacy. What should the family constitutional pit maneuver? I think maybe you're talking, like talk to text. This happens to me all the time. Just look at what you wrote and put the comment back up. Yeah. Well, yeah. Ask any questions you want though, Eddie. It's all good. What should be in the family conflict resolution? Okay, so the conflict resolution article should kind of mirror wherever your family's like base is. It should kind of mirror their like legal framework, right? Because you want it to also teach the heirs like how to deal with the local laws, wherever you are. So there should be a bit of a mirror of the legal framework there, right? But you want to sit down with a professional and like figure out how to deal with the most common things that plague families. That professional could be a family therapist, could be a sociologist, could be even an attorney, but like a specific attorney, like a family attorney, like a divorce attorney, right? So you want somebody who has, some sort of expertise, and it's like we use sociologists, psychologists, and so on and so forth, right? And then our law firm has been doing this for a while, so our legal experts can typically bring up scenarios that the person who's building their family constitution had never thought of, right? Especially if they're preemptively building it, right? So those folks who are planning and they're not even married and they don't have any kids and they don't even have none of that going on yet, we're able to prepare them for the most common things that will happen, typically in a marriage and with children and all of that stuff, and moving forward, right? So your conflict resolution needs to be strong enough to resolve any and all conflicts that may happen, and then at the same time, you want to make sure that there are structures in there that keep it unbiased and keep it predictable. The predictability, which we also call transparency, we typically call it transparency when it's a government. It's predictability, right? So understanding that, like, oh, okay, when I file a lawsuit, I'm going to get my day in court, and then these are the elements that I'm going to have to prove. And if I can prove that I have this standing, then I should win the lawsuit. That's predictability, right? So having that predictability built into the conflict resolution is what makes it work. I was watching one of your other lives. So what kind of conflicts get resolved? All of them. And typically what it boils down to, and again, it mirrors your local like legal system, right? So typically, what it boils down to is unresolved conflicts. If you and your neighbor have a dispute, and you and your neighbor resolve the dispute, it doesn't go to court, right? Nobody sues anybody because you resolve the conflict. If it's an unresolved conflict, that's when somebody ends up getting taken a small claims court, right? So it's the same thing in your family constitution. If the cousins can, figure it out and say sorry to each other, we're all good. If they can't figure it out, that's when the family steps in, and now essentially you're being sued, you know what I mean, by the family, and then there's essentially a family court type of situation that would take place, and then there would be an unbiased process by which, if there needs to be any discipline, the family issues out discipline. If not, then not, and the resolution of that problem takes place. Everybody, accepts it because it's an unbiased determination, and then you move forward. But the worst thing that can happen in a family is that the family's engine gets stalled by some petty nonsense, in which most things are petty nonsense in the face of the generations of your family. Like in the face of like your family's future, most things are petty nonsense. There's even mechanisms by which people can be expelled from the family, right? If the crazy uncle touched his niece, you know what I mean? Maybe he should be expelled from the family. You know what I'm saying? So there's definitely mechanisms by which someone can just be kicked out of the family, because sometimes that's what's necessary to move forward, right? So again, it goes back to what we already understand in the workplace. Like we already understand that we need these things. We need HR to settle disputes where we can't settle them amongst coworkers. We need to know what our job is. We need to know the values of the company. We need to know what we're selling or what business the company is doing. We need to know how that works. We need to know the history of the company and whether the company is successful or not. Like we already understand all of this. We just don't apply it to our families. Right? If somebody does something crazy like that, they get fired, they get kicked out of the company, they're no longer part of the company. That can happen in a family as well. So it's just codifying everything so that everybody understands their place and they understand what direction the family is moving in, and how to assist in that, and then the family is unstoppable. What is the document? Oh, and you're asking me on Facebook Live. So on TikTok, I can like show, like I can do things where pictures pop up and I can like show you pictures of things. I can't do that on where you're asking. But I mean, the document can look as kind of official slash regal, as you want it to. A lot of people will do it where it actually looks like the U.S. Constitution with like the old English, script and all of that. You can do that, or it can just look like a memo. You know what I mean? We've seen people do it that way as well. But it has a structure. The structure is essentially the same as any other constitution, whether it's a corporate constitution or a company constitution, or country constitution. There's a structure. There's like a preamble, and there are articles, and each article breaks down a certain thing, and it tries to be as clear as possible so that you understand exactly like what's going on, and it lets people know what the hierarchy is and who's in charge, and you know what I mean. Who do you go to for help, and who do you not, and so on and so forth. So same type of thing. Should I consult your legal for my wedding preparations planning, i.e., determining no past finance conflict, predicting licensing, etc. Licensing. Huh. Should I consult your legal for my wedding preparations? Sometimes. Okay. I'm not sure everything you're asking. I know you have like a character limit, so I get it. But sometimes. So for example, we've had folks that they wanted to bring a spouse to like the US or something like that, as part of like a passport portfolio plan. So like bring the spouse to the US, live there for the 2 years that it would take for the green card to go permanent. I think it takes 2 more years to file for naturalization, get the US passport, and then do a swap where like wherever the spouse is from, you get the spouse's passport, they get your passport, blah 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 blah, and move on, right? So depending on the strategy, the timing of the marriage might disrupt the strategy. Oh, the marriage license, got you. Okay, so the strategy, then what you might run into is that it makes more sense to do a Class K, like what they call a fiance visa, versus getting married in that person's home country, where you would now have to sponsor them as a family member and wait 7 years for that sponsorship to go through. Whereas your fiance visa is typically done in 6 months, right? So 6 months, 7 years, big difference. And a lot of people will screw that up because their spouse doesn't get it and wants their mom at the wedding, so they'll upset their entire passport portfolio plan and their financial plan for 7 years, which at that point the marriage might even be over, versus being able to execute all those things in the first 6 months, right? And finances are sometimes a major contributor to why people break up. So if a dumb decision happens at the beginning that down the road affects your finances, that decision might be directly responsible for the marriage not working, right? So it just depends. It depends on what it is that what kind of planning is associated, with the wedding. Because I know you're overseas, so it just depends on what kind of planning you're associating with that. What you want to, what you want to do. If there's a generational wealth, plan attached to it, and there's a passport portfolio plan attached to it, then where you get married might matter. No, no, I mean, like, I don't know if you're not supposed to, but I run on I run on the assumption that you're not supposed to know how to do a family constitution, right? That's why you need a professional. Most of this stuff, you just don't know what you don't know. So because you don't know what you don't know, you never get the benefit of that thing that's within reach, right? So that's where professionals come in, right? That's just all there is to it, right? And for some reason, we have an issue paying professionals to improve our lives, right? And we tend to not have an issue when it's our actual life on the line, right? Then we'll go pay a doctor, all the money in the world to extend our life, and then we get it. Oh yeah, pay a professional and improve the quality of my life. But when it's not that, we seem to have an issue getting a professional involved to improve the quality of our lives. So that, yeah, I wouldn't think that you would know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it till I worked for a law firm. So I wouldn't think that you would know how to do it. You just need to make a decision on what you want your life to be, and then hire the professional that can get you that. What if then they're not a professional? Like if you're a professional, like even the doctors, right? You might go for a surgery and the doctor botches the surgery. So what happens? Malpractice insurance kicks in because they're a professional, right? So they have, insurance, they have a corporate structure somewhere behind them, whether it's the hospital or whether they actually own their own practice and they have that corporate structure. There's insurance, right? Because they're a real professional. So if you're dealing with a real professional, you're going to get what you pay for, or like their malpractice. When you're not a doctor, it's called errors and omissions insurance. So, but it's still malpractice insurance. So that insurance is going to kick in because they're a professional, right? So when I say professional, I don't mean the idiot on TikTok who claims that they're professional, but when it comes time to pay them, they're like, yeah, cash at me. It's not a professional. Right? I mean, someone who actually has insurance, actually has a practice, actually knows what they're doing, can be held accountable on their law, and that if they need to be held accountable, there's an umbrella policy in insurance that will simply pay you out. A professional, right? That's who you should be dealing with. Oh, that was past finance. That was no past fiance. Got you. Got you. Oh yeah, 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 definitely. We can. They should be able to, like, if it's here, they should be able to get a Oh wait, no, you're I'm sorry, you're central, right? So you're doing everything in the U.S.? Sorry, Eddie, I confused you there for a minute. You're in Central America, not Central America, but the Central Time Zone in America, right? Is your fiance local or international? Sorry, I confused you with someone else there for a minute. Yes, 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 yes. Sure, you can. Yeah, 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 of course you can. You can always ask for insurance documentation. Yeah, proof of insurance. Proof of insurance has nothing on it that can allow anybody to scan. So you ask for proof of insurance, like, oh, that's my personal information. I can't disclose. I get red flag. Bye. Yeah, but you can always ask for proof of insurance. Now, there are something called supplemental policies, right? So, what could happen? You can ask for proof of insurance, and then the comeback could be um, that in the service agreement there will be a clause that a supplemental policy of insurance will be taken out for your specific contract and service agreement. That is a valid response, right? Because a lot of people are just bullshitters and they just talk, 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 and they never get anything done. So there are, especially with specialists, right? So their specialist is like a step above a professional. Especially with specialists, they may say, okay, no, no, we make it a requirement of the contract, right? So we'll do a service agreement. Here's the deliverables. Here's what I'm going to do for you. And as a requirement of the contract, after you sign the contract, I will take out a specific insurance policy, and I will have to give you the insurance certificate, and you'll be named on that insurance policy as what's called additional insured, right? To make sure that you can get a payout from that policy. And then that's part of the contract. If I don't do that, I default on the contract and the blah, 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 blah. So that keeps people who are just, talking shit from using your resources. So they would essentially have to onboard before they got that insurance certificate. And then, that's fine. Then they'll have an insurance certificate on file. It would be part of the contract. It would be legally binding. And then you go from there. We do that a lot sometimes with like building houses. Like we have a immigration firm, and then when we immigrate people here, they need a place to live, so we tend to build them a house. And so with those folks, sometimes we'll do that where like if something goes wrong with the construction site or whatever, they know that there's insurance in place. But it doesn't make sense for us to go through all that and add additional insurance for somebody who hasn't actually paid to build the house yet. So in order for us to go ahead and go through that expense, it'll just be a requirement of the contract. And then, when they come on and do the contract and they wire the money, they'll get their receipt for the money that they wired, and they'll get the certificate of insurance with their name on it as additional insured and everything that's covered on the insurance and all of that, because now they're serious. So now it makes sense to go through that process. What if they want it first? Then we wouldn't be the right firm for them. They should go do business with somebody else. I'm sure they find somebody who would go ahead and go through all of that expense without a guarantee of business. So they should go find that person. Not all money is good money for you. I mean, don't chase money. You're not going to have a very good life. You go chasing money. chase your target client, the ones that make sense for you. Everybody else can go somewhere else. It's okay. It's okay. Do you have to name your children? No. No, 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 no. You don't have to name your children in the family constitution, right? You can name the criteria by which someone is considered family. You can do that, or you can name the criteria by which somebody is a member of that lineage of the family, and then you could define what, branches of the family are and how they're determined, right? So you could do something like that. But no, you don't have to name specific people. Even in a family trust, you wouldn't necessarily need to name specific people. But you do want to make sure that there's a clear criteria as to who is included in the trust and who is not. So when people aren't specifically named, normally it's a DNA test that decides who is part of the trust and who isn't. In what context? I can't tell anything from that question. Prenup or trust, in what context? What kind of trust? Irrevocable trust, offshore trust, revocable trust, land trust? What are you talking about? Prenup versus trust. Which one protects? Which one protects your legacy more? Still a little bit vague, but if you're talking legacy, we've seen in our experience that a trust can protect your legacy. Now, individually, if you create a trust in response to marriage, that trust can be set aside. We only deal with offshore trusts, so it's a little bit harder to set aside our trust anyway. But if your trust is in response to something, it can always be set aside, right? So now you said legacy, though. We've definitely had plenty of clients who set up trusts for their children, and then their children got into a child support divorce situation, and the trust protected their children from both child support and divorce. So from a legacy situation, the trust is probably a more powerful tool to protect the legacy. But from an individual situation in response to a marriage, probably a prenup is more suitable in response to marriage. How did it protect the children? So there's a specific case that one of our clients had, where they set up a family trust to benefit the kids. I think when they set it up, the kids were 14, and they set it up so that the trust owns a company. I guess I'm not going to say what the company does, but the trust owns a company, and the company is active. The company is doing something and making money. And the kids are allowed to intern and then eventually be hired at the company, and that starts at 16, because the state that they were in, you could start working at 16. And so the kids were working for this offshore company from the age of 16. 2 years later, they graduated high school. They were hired full time by the company, and they were put in company housing, and there were corporate vehicles that the company had by the age of 20. So that's 4 years out. Somebody had latched on to one of the sons, really liked the house that he lived in, which was a corporate house owned by the trust. Really liked the car he drove, which was a corporate car owned by the trust. And he had been making minimum wage since the first day he was working, and still made minimum wage. A year after that marriage, a child had been born, and within months of the child being born, the wife filed for divorce, and wanted half of the big fancy house and half of the big fancy car and all of that. It was found that the company owned everything, not him. And his pay rate since the first day he had ever worked was minimum wage. So the judge said, yep, your child support is $50 a month, and he doesn't own a house or a car, so you don't get half of that. And so that woman actually gave him the baby and walked, and then told the next man that she had never had any children, and started her scam over again. So your question was legacy. From that legacy standpoint, even though they weren't even thinking about that, what they set up for their kids protected their kids from child support, from divorce, from losing everything in divorce, and all of that. But if it was the father who had set it up and the mother, then it wouldn't have played out that way. So it was about history. It was about that trust being in place and having nothing to do with that kid's marriage, because the trust was created when the kid was 14 years old, right? So it had nothing to do with that kid's marriage. It had nothing to do with trying to keep a spouse from getting their rightful share or anything like that, right? And it just so happened that that protection was already in place when that person tried to run game on him. So it didn't work. So that's how that protection would set in. So for legacy, yeah, you can definitely set it up where on paper every member of your family only makes minimum wage and has for their entire life, right? So it's not a response to a marriage. It's not a response to a debt, collector. It's not oh, you put me on child support, so I'm going to quit my $200,000 a year job and go get a job at McDonald's. That doesn't work, right? So it can't be a response going to work for the company that the trust owns. I'm going to go work for Google, and now I make $250,000 a year, and on record. Well, now that's what the child support is going to be based off of, right? If it's I'm not living in the corporate housing anymore, I'm going to buy my own house. Well, now half of that house is up for it. So, the family has to be kind of disciplined. I think he was just young enough that like he hadn't done all that yet, and she was dumb enough that she tried to get now, because of that situation, they all only get paid the minimum wage. They only work for the family corporation, and they only live in corporate housing now. So now it's like it has become an artifact. It's become an artifact in their family where that's how they protect themselves is, they do things like that. There are communities, back in the hood, like back where I came from, there were communities of people that would never actually get married, right? So they would go to their temple and get married before their god, but they'd never get married before the government. And the fathers would never sign the birth certificates. So all of their wives, and like the fathers made big money, but all of their wives were on welfare, and welfare never came after the father because there was no father on the birth certificate. So welfare never like pushed child support, and like their entire community operated that way. And some of these guys were like dentists and lawyers and like whatever, but they would never legally get married. They would only go to their temples and get married there. And the fathers would not be on the birth certificate. And then in their religion, you were whatever religion your mother was. So religiously speaking, it was cohesive. So all the children were part of the same religion, right? But like that's just the way that they did things. So the planning, when you plan stuff out, then you can have like generational protections in place or get generational benefits, because you plan things out in advance. So planning is definitely king. You know what I mean? And what they were doing, I would think that was, you know, fraud, quite frankly. But you can plan things out and make those things like legitimate, where they're not fraudulent, and just have a certain level of protection because you planned in advance. And that's the other like benefit to the passport portfolio stuff, is that if laws change, if you have the passport portfolios, you can recenter yourself to a place where the laws are still, on your side. That answered your question. All right. Just got a plan. Can't be reactive. Reactive people lose. Gotta be proactive. Who's who? Oh, the gardener. Y'all looking in the background? Well, yeah, I mean, you want to run your household like a business, right? So we have a full staff, we have profit and loss statements, we have meetings, once a quarter, and then an annual meeting, we have budgets, we have runway, that's part of the financial discipline. Yes, it is incorporated. Yep. Well, it creates accountability. Yeah, it creates accountability. Then your kids see how to balance like a budget, like for real, not a checkbook. You know what I mean? So they see how to, manage employees, and how to manage conflict at the workplace and all of that stuff. So yeah. Well, it depends on what you want. Like it depends on what you want out of life. It depends on what you want, for your peoples. Uh-oh, TikTok, I think you got you with data. I think everybody else is good. Yeah. TikTok, I don't know if you're even hearing me at the moment. I don't know what that's about. Okay. I think you're losing it, TikTok. I think we're losing you, unfortunately. I don't know what the issue is with that. I'm sorry, guys, if TikTok can't hear me anymore. If you can, go ahead and throw something in the chat, just so I know what's going on. The rest of you guys are fine, though. Um, Facebook and YouTube, you guys are fine. All right. Any other questions on that? I don't see anything in the TikTok chat, so I'm assuming you're not actually online. I'll have to look into that. Anything else on that? Any other questions on family constitution? Oh,
Excuse me. Excuse me.
okay. That was weird. Huh, that was weird. Went off, came right back on. All right, any other questions on family constitution? Any other questions on family constitution? What it takes to build a dynasty family? We're all good on that? All right, all right. Well, if we are good on that, it has been almost 2 hours. I will call it a day. All right, looks like we're good. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. Sorry about the data glitch last minute there, but it looks like we're all good with that. And I will see you tomorrow morning for me, tomorrow night for you guys in the United States. And then tomorrow we will be talking about business structures and probably offshore business structures and why they matter and why they work. All right, guys, talk to you soon. Bye bye.